Our first speaker tonight is Narungga Elder Kerry White. Kerry was born in Port Augusta. She spent her early career as a nurse before running her own antique shop and a plant nursery. She's an elder of the Narungga people. She's greatly respected on the Yorke Peninsula and has worked in many community roles, including at the Port Pirie Aboriginal Community Centre. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Kerry White.
Good evening, everyone. It's nice to see you all here. Now, my grandfather and mother and extended family actually come from Point Pearce over on the Yorke Peninsula. Through extended family ties, I'm also Atnamatna, Ghana, Nukana, Wilpiri and Pitjantjatjara. And tonight I'm going to share a few facts with you, some that you may have heard of before and some of it may be new to you. Now, Albanese claims that the voice to Parliament came about due to the Uluru Statement from the Heart. But the push by activists for a treaty began as early as 1888. Since then, there have been several recorded attempts, and in 1924, they began pushing the federal government for a treaty. Bob Hawke in 1988 committed to a treaty by 1990. This promise, however, was broken in 1991 in favour of reconciliation. In 1989, ATSIC was established. Several Aboriginal organisations were set up under ATSIC to deliver outcome-based services to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Neither the organisations nor ATSIC delivered on the promised outcomes. ATSIC was not interested in doing the job that they were established to do. What then was ATSIC's priority? The answer to that question came in 1995 when ATSIC pushed the Keating government for social justice package, including, you guessed it, constitutional recognition. Thankfully, that didn't happen and was never implemented. In 2000, there was another push for treaty and constitutional change. Then in 2010, the Gillard government pushed for constitutional change. They didn't get it. In 2017, the Uluru Statement from the Heart emerged, but whose statement was it? The Uluru Statement from the Heart was orchestrated by Thomas Mayo. Thomas Mayo, by his own admission, likes the communist-style regime and will be asking for rent, repatriations to be paid by the Australian people, and the end game is money, power, control, and the elimination of our current system of government. In 2017, Malcolm Turnbull rejected the Indigenous voice to Parliament, and it was stated at the time, and I quote, "The Referendum Council provided no guidance as to how this new representative assembly would be elected or how the diversity of Indigenous circumstances and experience could be fairly and democratically represented," end quote. Here we are in 2023, and that statement is as true today as it was back then. When Turnbull rejected the voice to Parliament, he was labelled as, and I quote, "mean-spirited bastardly," end quote. Now they just label anyone and everyone who opposes the voice as racist. 2 years ago, news travelled through the Aboriginal grapevine that the Uluru mob were not happy about the statement. The Pitjantjatjara and Yankunytjatjara are the traditional owners of the land that Chukara, Uluru, sits on. Numerous elders were shocked when they learnt that their names appeared on the canvas that they didn't endorse nor want. The canvas is Aboriginal term for document. The elders want the Australian public to know about the lie that is being sold to them as factual. They have rejected the voice to Parliament, and they ask that you do too. This means that the Uluru Statement from the Heart is a fraudulent document that has been pushed onto every Australian as representing the will of the Aboriginal people. Aboriginal groups have taken to Twitter, creating short videos with a simple message: we vote no. There are many pitfalls in the Indigenous voice to Parliament. One is in the name itself. The definition of Indigenous means native to a particular place or country. Therefore, anyone born in Australia is Indigenous and can be a representative of the voice in Parliament. This serves the activists well. The government seems unwilling to address the ticker box revolution. Why should they? Labor abolished the proof of Aboriginality back in the early 2000s. According to the census, there are 800,000 plus Aboriginal people in Australia. The actual number is actually half that. The average lifespan of Aboriginal person is 65 years of age. They have the worst health outcomes in Australia: diabetes, heart failure and kidney disease topping the list. Aboriginal people for decades have endured high infant mortality rates, so our numbers have not increased significantly over the last 100 years. Aboriginal numbers, according to the census, soared since approximately 2005, when the government abolished proof of Aboriginality. Consequently, this means that the ticker box movement will be able to have a say on what happens regarding Aboriginal people without knowledge of the complexities and diversity within the different Aboriginal mobs. Albanese stated in one of his many media appearances in relation to the voice that billions of dollars have been spent on Aboriginal people and nothing has changed. That is an undisputable fact. The question is, why has nothing changed? The answer is simple. For decades, Aboriginal people have been exploited to gain millions of dollars in funding by Aboriginal organisations set up to provide outcomes for Aboriginal people. In the last 3 decades, a growing number of not-for-profit organisations have capitalised on the feeding frenzy. Health services also get a large chunk of the pie if they show that they can provide services for Aboriginal people. The sad truth is that Aboriginal people in rural and remote communities do not benefit from those billions of dollars. Another fact is that millions have been wrought by individuals within these organisations. Plus, there is also the millions wasted in the endless pursuit of a treaty, the voice, and changing our constitution. The Australian public is continually being fed mistruths to support the elite's narratives to gain access to more power and more taxpayers' dollars. Back in the early 2000s, AHAC's Aboriginal Health Advisory Committees were working on a draft proposal to put forward to the government of closing the gap. We finally got it passed, but the gap between Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal health continues to widen. Why is this happening? The AHACs were a community initiative set up as an advisory body working in conjunction with our public health system. The AXA, the Aboriginal Health Council of South Australia, they began convincing the AHAC chairs that they needed to go community controlled. So then they started the wheels in motion, and when the AHACs found out that what they were going to get wasn't what they wanted, it was too late. And coincidentally, AXA ended up with the billions of dollars every year to run these services. Many of these community-controlled health services ended up closed in rural and remote communities. And 20 years ago, some Aboriginal families relocated from Alice Springs to South Australia because the health services in the territory were so bad. You may be aware that mining companies pay millions of dollars per year to some Aboriginal communities in the form of royalties. These communities are not thriving. Why? The reason lies in the way the royalty payments are structured, and once again, the money goes to the elite, and most of who don't even live in the communities they're getting paid royalty payments for. None of the royalty payments are being improved for living conditions, and you may be surprised, even angry to learn that those receiving these royalty payments are also collecting Centrelink benefits. They are required to disclose the royalty payments to Centrelink, but they don't. The supposedly stolen generation is another mistruth, which has brought about another Aboriginal organisation called Bringing Them Home. Back in the early 50s and 60s, mixed-race children were being removed and placed in institutions for their own safety. Mixed-race children were not accepted by blacks or whites and were being abused and in some cases died as a result of the injuries that they received in rural and remote communities. The problem is that in rural and remote communities, we are so far away from mainstream that a lot of things go unnoticed. But the elders in some of those remote communities, they set up dry zones in their community to combat alcohol-fuelled violence. Well, that created another problem because the parents and the grandparents were abandoning the children in the communities to head up to Alice Springs where they could gain access to alcohol. This again left the children in the communities unprotected and were being abused. There is no denying things need to change if we are to improve outcomes for Aboriginal people in rural and remote Australia. What is clear is that we need transparency, productivity and accountability for all the taxpayers' money spent by these organisations and the government. What we don't need is more of the same BS that for generations has been built on untruths, half-truths and fiction. We, the Aboriginal people of rural and remote Australia, reject the tokenistic sorry day and welcome to country. The welcome to country was the inception of one man, a disgraced Aboriginal actor by the name of Ernie Dingo. Aboriginal people in the rural and remote Australia were not consulted and we didn't want it. All the sorry day and welcome to country achieved for us was stir up racism towards us and fueled gang violence. None of us can change the past, but together we can change the future. Aboriginal people in rural and remote Australia want real change and tangible results for our communities. There is a saying, a new broom sweeps clean. It's time to clean house and remove the dead wood that is draining the public purse. Aboriginal people reject the divisive voice to Parliament. We are asking the good people of Australia to stand with us and reject it too. And to quote Pauline Hanson, we are one people, one nation, one Australia.
Well, what a powerful start to the evening, isn't it? Kerry, you're bringing people together. Obviously, people are very receptive to your message, but you won me when you mentioned the words and how people were referring to Malcolm Turnbull, and it reminded me I've thought about referring to him in those words myself. I may have done. So I've got something in common with the other team.